All right, so everybody should be able to see and hear me. Is that correct?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay, I am very excited to be here and very grateful for the opportunity to share what I have experienced from my Michigan campuses in relation to some of the amazing resources and tools that all of you are supporting. And then maybe, perhaps most importantly for me, is the conversation about how we can continue to make this better and more accessible. So today, my presentation is titled From Awareness to Adoption, and these are lessons from campus engagement and expanding access to national research infrastructure. This is me. I'm sure I know most of you. I'm the director of research and R&D at Merit Network. I'll talk just briefly about who Merit is and why we're related to universities. I'm a research associate at the Quello Center for Media and Information Policy at MSU, and I'm also an adjunct instructor at Oakland Community College. So, Merritt, if you're not familiar with us, we are owned and governed by the public universities in the state of Michigan. So, 60 years ago this month, the first two computers that spoke to each other did so in Michigan, and that's how Merit was created. We expanded, ran the commercial internet as you know it before it was the commercial internet and before we handed it over to the federal government. So we're a 501c3 nonprofit, and right now we own and operate 4,400 miles of fiber optic infrastructure in the state, and we serve 113 K-12 institutions and organizations. So we serve with cybersecurity, networking, research services, and so forth, all of the K-12s in the state. More than 166 public universities at all level, 4-year 2-year, public and private. And we've got 400 plus member organizations and more than 750 affiliate organizations in all sorts of sectors like healthcare, government, state, those sorts of things. We're governed by the CIOs of the public universities, and we host an annual event every year with more than 650 attendees. So today, when I'm giving you kind of the feedback and a little bit of information about us, I'm speaking from my experience going on 11 years now in this institution, and also several presentations every single year, not only at these very large annual conferences in the state of Michigan, but also with engagements at the national level as well. So it's a pretty wide body of experience and feedback. To give you an idea of what our team does, we really hope to do both theoretical and practical aspects of networking, cybersecurity, technology, and broadband research to do a number of things. But the thing that I really want to bring to your attention here is that one of our biggest goals here is to help democratize access to science, to learning, to resources, and then to bridge those gaps between academic scholarship and practical application. So the universities that I work with are very wide spanning. We've got 4 R1s in the state, and we've got tons and tons and tons of teaching colleges, tribal colleges, under resource institutions, 2-year schools, technical career centers. So the majority of the folks that I'm working with are very limited and constrained in terms of resources and capacity. As part of what I do, I present and kind of conduct listening tours every single year with various sectors of my educational groups. So I do, this past year, just conducted the 4-year public university listening tours. This upcoming year, starting in the fall, I'll be visiting mostly the private colleges and the 2-year institutions. And I just kind of continue to circle back. And when I do meet with them, I talk with individual researchers, research computing staff, tech directors, the AVPs, senior administration, CIOs. So it's a pretty broad smattering of folks, even sometimes some student representation as well. And when I talk with them, I ask things, what needs do you have are unmet in terms of research, resources, data sets, scheduling jobs, computing, whatever it might be. what barriers exist to growing that resource or research, conducting your experiments, conducting research at a campus level. I talk to them about infrastructure challenges and other things that researchers need, but they don't have access to because I may not always have the answers, but I may be aware of things like public resources, or if I hear enough of a certain need, sometimes it really makes a case for a, consortial grant application or something like that. And our research portfolio is pretty diverse right now. So we've got about 7 active grants in the Merit Research Department, everything from infrastructure, darknet, cybersecurity, running a SOC in our information security division. We've got a lot of broadband technical assistance grants, some AI and ML. So it's very broad and diverse. And primarily, when I'm meeting with them, I'm hearing a whole lot of things about unmet needs in terms of everything: compute, storage, resources, understanding, infrastructure, data sets, pretty well across the board, with the exception of the 4R1s. And I would say this 10% number that you're seeing on the screen is, that's probably an overestimation. I didn't exactly do the math, but there were very few individuals that were familiar with OSG, OSPool, Open Science Data Federation, the national research platforms, other national research cybersecurity ecosystems too. So, this conversation really started to take shape. Tim did some presentations and some conversations at the NSFPI workshop in New Orleans over the winter, and he was talking about how, one of his goals was to spread awareness and spread access and really increase the use of the OSG and OSDF resources. And he asked the question about why we thought that there wasn't, this overwhelming use where you were at capacity or max capacity. And I started to have these conversations, and, first and foremost, really, there was only one non-R1 university that was aware of any of these things, and they were only aware of it because they had come from an R1. Um, some of the challenges that we've been hearing about it, when I start to share, Tim had some great resources that he shared on the platforms and slides, and the OSG and OSDF office hours are phenomenal. There's great documentation on the website. So I'm sharing all of these things. And what I'm hearing back are essentially 4 things. We don't have the capacity. We didn't know this existed. So even if like somebody does at a university, that doesn't necessarily mean that everybody does. We don't know where to begin. This is one that I think is also critical. So I think a lot of times we want, okay, here's the resources, here's the office hours, here's the documentation. It's, sink or swim. You've got to figure these things out for yourself because we're all resource limited in the support and help that we can offer. And I've really noticed that for any resources, even, we run one of the largest open public darknet international telescopes in the world. And we have a data dictionary, a data set, very clear instructions for accessing. And a lot of the times it's the unfamiliarity. Like you have to get in there and build the relationships and sit there with individuals while they do it. You have to support their change management plans. It's really more about the relationships and like the encouragement until they're comfortable and moving than it is just providing the resources, because especially in education, coming as an educator myself, we're all overwhelmed. And even the thought of, even if it's simple, trying to learn one more thing, sometimes even at the collegiate level, is very difficult. The other thing too is the change management. So I heard back a lot on campuses about, well, my researchers would rather just work with the synthetic data sets they're using that are saved on their external hard drives that they're plugging into the machines, and they only want to store their data there because they can keep eyes on it. So that's another challenge too, is just the people change management, the organizational design flavor of that, in terms of trusting national resources, trusting national data sets, whatever that might be. Um, so this is just a little bit more about the onboarding reality that, whether it was for this or, I've got Horus and Osiris, I'll talk about in a minute too. Those were some infrastructure CC Star type grants that we received that we also had challenges with. So this is not just limited to these national resources that everybody can take a part of. So, some of it was the onboarding reality. So the relationship building was key, meeting over and over with multiple stakeholders, providing those technical guidances, being involved in pilot projects, follow-up support, helping with internal advocacy and repeated engagement. And I know that it can seem like, well, my job is to build this tool, my job is to maintain this tool. But I really see that, at least for Merit, because one of our biggest missions is to help spread, democratize access to these resources. Um, if we want to do that, it's much more glacial than we would all care for. But this is just what I've seen work on my end for the things that we've built and delivered. And I can talk about this from the telescope. We're really approaching that in a different way than we have in the past. But we had very large scale shared grants with several R1 universities in Michigan for many, many years, both compute and storage. And we had some similar barriers that emerged during these things. So they wanted and needed the resources, but they lacked awareness, they lacked the trust. Institutional buy-in was challenging. There was capacity constraints, even down to things like understanding how to be provisioned to get, to log into Globus or HT Condor when it was specific to like the in-common licensing and things like that. So we tried to learn from that, and we're seeing a lot more success with the new telescope initiative. And that's really the end of my presentation. And I don't know, maybe there'll be conversation now about it. Maybe this is something we can all go back and think about and reconvene, because like I said, I think that there is, at least in my state, in my university, is so much need for OSG, OSDF, and other national resources that we are not taking advantage of. But I know that they want, need, and could use it, and it would solve a lot of their challenges. So the questions that I kind of want to pose to this group, either now or for follow up later on, are a few things. So, are there other things that we can do collectively to reduce the onboarding burden? And when I say onboarding, it's awareness. Even think from somebody who's brand new to this. If I am a 2-year institution and want to start up a data science project, or maybe I'm an environmental science teacher at a community college and I want to start sharing all of my environmental sensor data with OSDF, or whatever it is. How do we reduce the barrier to entry for a very small institution or someone that's new? How do we better support those institutions that don't have much right now in terms of resources? There's a little bit too about, does anybody have any best practices about identifying campus champions? Any thoughts about building these trusted pathways into national resources? Because I'm not the only one, I guarantee you, who says, well, all of my scientists, including my team, struggle with taking things from where they can physically control them to resources that they don't control. And then how do we move from just that general awareness, and this is a later on question, to a longer term sustained participation? So that's the extent of what I have to say. I had been sharing some of this information with Tim and Christina, and they thought that this would be a pretty good forum to at least begin a discussion.
I don't know if you can hear it clapping, but we were clapping.
Oh, nope, but I can hear you. Thank you.
Yeah. So I will pass the mic to Jason.
Hi there, how you doing? Thanks for that presentation. That was excellent.
Thank you.
Oh yeah, hi, sorry, I'm Jason Sims. I'm the Research Computing Manager at Swarthmore College in Pennsylvania. And just, I actually want to comment on a few things, so I'll try to be kind of as encapsulated and brief as I can. One quick answer to that question about how do we identify campus champions. So I'm actually currently the chair of Campus Champions, and so on the one hand, it's very sad for me to hear that, how do I even find these? But I do want to say that within the last couple months, we've introduced a new, literally map-based service where you can see a map of Campus Champions, the organizations, where they're at, who they are, so that you can reach out and identify them and find the institutions that perhaps don't have a current Campus Champion that you might want to reach out to encourage engagement with that community. But on a kind of broader, tack a little bit. I've hosted the Research Computing for Smaller Institutions conference, and actually it's coming up next week for the third year, which builds off some earlier efforts even. And I just want to say that it's kind of reassuring in some sad ways that what I'm hearing from you is exactly what we're hearing from all of the smaller institutions who come to that. So we have about 100 institutions that come annually to this, and they say many of the same things that you do. I'm actually very interested that you were getting such candid feedback from the people you were speaking with, because one of the things that we see when we talk to researchers and stuff about, well, what do you need? One of the things that I uncovered pretty early is that they tend to say nothing because they're used to working within the research budget that they have. So they are so used to not having resources where they can scale up or scale out or whatever, that they just, they have scaled their research to fit within the environment that they've got. And so the fact that you were getting such candid, well, we would love to have extra storage, we would love to have extra compute, whatever it was, is really encouraging, because that tells me that they're thinking about what would be possible if. And that's the question that we struggle sometimes to get the researchers and even the administration to understand, is we can't think of it in terms of what are we lacking right now. We have to think about in terms of dream big, like what can we offer to our students? What kind of opportunities would we have if we had this infrastructure, if we had access to these services? But I would also just end, because I'm sure other people want to comment too, I'll say that one of the big barriers we find is that a lot of people will come to us and say, well, it's great if we had extra compute. It's great if we had extra, networking infrastructure so that we could connect out and, share these data sets, access them, whatever, for either research or pedagogical contexts. But the lack of the ability to buy themselves out of teaching with grants, which they can't do at smaller institutions typically, the lack of grad students or dedicated student, assistants to kind of churn through the results. So even if they scale up their research, what are they going to do with that? Like literally they don't have the cycles. And as I'm sure you're well aware, at smaller campuses, most of the research happens within a very small, tight window. Usually about a 10-week summer time is about all that they have to devote. And so that is almost an intractable problem that I would love to think about, how can we do regional collaborative efforts, those kind of things to, excuse me, to kind of help to address. But anyway, thank you very much for your talk, and I'm, really looking forward to the discussion here.
Yeah, and if you would like to, you can email research@merit.edu is the easiest way to get a hold of me. I would love to continue that conversation. I think one of the reasons why I get the feedback that I get with my research teams is because we've been positioned as the research and education network for so many years with them, that when they've got problems like that, we've already done like a handful of these larger scale shared collaborations. So whether we're setting up like as the R&E student research projects where we work with multiple students or researchers from other campuses, like we've already built a few of those pathways. And I think either like probably like Keystone REN might be a good place to think about having some of those conversations with too. So if you are interested, we could maybe share some other ideas offline.
Brett, this is Tim Cartwright again. I love your questions here on this last slide. Now it suddenly feels like we don't have nearly enough time to talk, but that just means we need to do this again. But I want to ask you a question and push back just a little bit. In your opinion, what role can a REN play in helping with exactly these kinds of things? I just confirmed this with Christina. So the PATH project, we have facilitators that operate at the national level, and we've got about 2 FTEs worth, of effort there for the whole country. And so one of the things that we've long had in mind is, we need to build relationships with other organizations, whatever those are, to help, like we help you and then you help your people. Is that a model that you think would work, at least for Merit in Michigan?
Yeah, that would absolutely be a model that would work for Merit in Michigan. And Tim, to be honest, I'm trying to kind of infiltrate the national research and education group a little bit more. We've got a conference coming up in I think it's in Philly in September, and I feel like my short-winded answer here is back in the 90s, research and education networks really collaborated with one another. And then when the BTOP era came, everyone really focused on building their own networks. And I've been pushing at the national level for us to go back to our roots. So if we go back here just briefly to, this is the mission and the goals of not of merit, but of merit and the research and education department at Merit. So what we do. So we're really trying to support learning, support experimentation, enable these multi-institutional research collaborations. Like that's what we're doing at our core. And it can be, I think, especially right now, just in the economic times that we're in and grants being as difficult to get as they are, a lot of times it's like, well, how do we sustain, we want to build sustainability into the models at the front. And, from my experience in doing this for 11 years, it's been, you do this to do and support the right thing. And then the financial sustainability comes after that. So like, that's, I think, Tim, if you want to follow up offline and have some of these conversations about how we can try to get the other RENs. And I know I saw a couple of folks from RENs. I'm not going to call you out, Dave Plonka, but I saw a few from RENs in the Zoom at least too. But I think that like that might be something we could all work together on, because all of us helping our institutions and our members will raise all of the tides. So I'd love to keep talking about that.
Unmute and talk, if that's possible.
Hi, this is Dave Blanca. Were you inviting me or anyone who's remote?
Yes, you were the
Yeah,
Dave of which
yeah.
I was speaking.
As Tim said, I don't think there's a lot of time, but the question that I would have to Perrette, just because it's the question I like to get, is what is the success that we've had? So I just started using OS Pool last year. I went to a Throughput Computing Week, learned it myself, and I've been an ambassador for it to our members in WISNet. I put in the chat that I'm roughly in the equivalent role that Perrette is, but for Wisconsin's Research and Education Network. And I have only one great story after that time, but Marquette University and WISCNet have used the OS Pool not only for the compute infrastructure, but as a meeting place to do the collaboration. I don't know if that maps well for a lot of other institutions, but I would imagine it might, because what it meant is I can work with graduate students at Marquette I don't need an account on Marquette's infrastructure. Marquette doesn't need an account on WISNet infrastructure. So by using the OS Pool and CHTC as a middle ground, where we set up a project, we have a safe space for both of us to work. It draws up lines where I'll do, for instance, I'll scour privacy sensitive data out of our data sets before I put it on OS Pool so that the student can work with it. So it's been really good that way. But what I agree with certainly what Jason said. I'm frustrated, not with small institutions. I'm frustrated with my lack of ability yet to show them how compelling it is to use these infrastructures. And what I'm learning from some of the small institution professors is it's almost unbelievable to them that they can use someone else's compute resource and trust that it will be available to them. So they've been a little bit gun shy. And I want to show at our annual member meetings, I just want to showcase that this really works. And it's really mimicking, just on a different scale or in the state realm of what you guys already do with Throughput Computing Week. You do a great job of showcasing, astronomical research or biological research. We need to take it down to, this is a small study of, cyber defense at one school or something, and show how that works there too. Anyway, that's the tack that I'm taking, but I'm happy outside of this to hear other people's perspective.
Love that idea, Dave. Yeah. Bring it down to it's very easy if you're a bigger school or bigger resource to say, oh, well, that worked for this other, very large group of people who are well resourced. Okay, cool, but that's not me. So I love that idea of modeling smaller applications.
Yeah, and I'll just add, Brett, I really appreciated your kind of 4 barriers. I think that was a nice categorization of things. and that you highlighted that sort of locality. I mean, we can't even get some of the engineers at Madison to use our central services. You know, they want to have their own thing. So that's a really human impulse, and I think it's always going to be there. That's the way it is. But like to incorporate that in our planning, I think makes a lot of sense. So, Tim was going to plug.
Yeah, I just want to, I was surprised you didn't mention this, Brett, but one of the ways that we try to do this sort of, we help people at other institutions or groups who can then help their own constituents. So Dave, as he mentioned, came to the OSG school last year. This is our premier training, in-person training event that we run. This year it's in mid-July. And this year, Perrette is sending one of her brand new staff to the school. So we are actually trying to help Merit get more up to speed with this stuff so that they can then help the researchers that trust them. So we're trying to build those trust networks. Thank you so much, Perrette. We're going to move on here, but I hope you can stick around for the rest of the session.
Yeah. Thank you so much for including me.
Oh, of course. And Preston, when you're ready.